Welcome to The Global Girlfriend.
Shall we book a trip to Shanghai?
Yep.
Hey everyone, welcome back, or welcome for the first time to the Global Girlfriend. My name's Morgan,
And my name's Brianna.
and we're your host for today. We are a podcast that is all about traveling, living abroad, and connecting women and people all over the world by telling stories and sharing tips and everything that goes into that. And today we really love this topic. We've loved pretty much all the topics we've done so far, but this one's a really good one. And it's the power in being different and embracing the unconventional life. And a lot of times this comes with living abroad or traveling extensively. So I think it's super applicable for sure to us and to people who are listening. So we're going to talk about defining the norm, what that looks like culturally, socially, within family structures. And yeah, pose the question of maybe what if different isn't wrong and it's just different. Okay, so maybe we love a little story time. Maybe let's talk a little bit of a personal anecdote of a time where we realized, we weren't living quite the quote unquote normal life and how that felt. Brianna, do you have a story that comes to mind?
I
Is there
have,
like an aha moment?
I wouldn't say it's an aha moment, but I would say that this is something that has kind of slowly developed over time. And the deeper I get into my 30s, the more sort of intense it feels. But I just I think going home for me is always like a bit of a shock to the system. And I think for me, sort of
Mm-hmm.
definitely in the past few years, what I've really realized is different is sort of just my approach to settling down. Because I think something that I struggle with a little bit is I do think I want some of the quote unquote normal things that women in their 30s want, but my approach is a little bit different because I want to keep
Mm-hmm.
doing it in an international context. And I would say for me, definitely over the last few summers, like every time I go home, someone new has bought a house. And I
Mm-hmm.
love seeing the houses that people are buying. It's like really wonderful to go and do the house tours and have a housewarming. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, every time I see someone with a new house, I'm like, oh gosh, I don't have that. I don't think I could have that even if I wanted it. Am I behind? And then, obviously I can reframe it for myself and I can think about the other things that I have invested in that are not home ownership. But I would say for
Mm-hmm.
me, definitely every time I go back and someone else has bought a house, that is like a big reflection to me of like, oh, you're doing things a little bit differently. And that's okay. But definitely it feels different. What about you?
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And I feel like I can completely relate. And I feel like when I was living abroad, that definitely, it was the most in your face when you would come visit home. And for me, it was in a little bit different way because, yes, there's obviously life is always changing. People who are home, they're, yeah, buying houses, getting married, having kids, and whatnot. But also, like, a little bit like on the other side of the spectrum with that is like things are also like seemingly the same or like normal. And so I felt like more like internally as I was kind of evolving in all these ways and wanting these different things and having these different dreams. And it felt so normal when I was talking to other expats and we had these things that we would talk about, and then I would feel like I would go home and I'd be all excited to talk about these dreams and stuff that I have, and it just wasn't a people around me at home's realities. And so it sometimes I felt like such a vastly different person that like had very abnormal dreams and thoughts and such. So I feel like it definitely confronts you when you're visiting back home.
Totally. And I think, for the purpose of today's episode, because when we had a conversation about wanting to do this episode, what does being different actually mean? And I mean, there's the audience of the Global Girlfriend is so diverse and so vast. So we know that being normal. First of all, there's no such thing as normal.
Yeah.
But the societal expectations, feeling normal, that is different across cultures. However, if you are a woman in your 30s, definitely there are some pressures that we just can't pretend do not exist. And so for the purpose of this episode, like when we're talking about being different, we're talking about, people who have chosen to live abroad, people who have chosen to travel a lot, people who have chosen to prioritize travel and adventure over their career. I think sometimes for women, there's a huge pressure to get ahead in your career and build your career. And we know a lot of women who make their own money but don't have a career that they're obsessed with, and that's okay. Another big thing is women who have children, women who have chosen not to have children, women who are delaying having a baby. That's a huge thing that can make a woman feel different. So maybe that's you. And then also that we talk about it a lot, this idea of like being single or not being in a conventional relationship. If you're going through any of those things, and that's not by any means an extensive list, but if you're experiencing any of those things, this episode
Mhm.
is for you because society does make people who experience those things feel quite different.
Yeah,
Morgan,
absolutely.
have you ever met anybody through your travels that was doing things differently and you were like, "Damn, I want to be like her."
Oh, that's a great question. That's a great question. Um, yeah, I mean, I definitely think so. I think that I'm trying to think of an example of that, and for whatever reason, just like right off the bat, wasn't coming to my mind. But I feel like as I've met people living abroad in such informed, close relationships, and I feel like people that I really look up to and like are such an inspiration to me. One, you are one of them, and then also I would you come to mind, and Izzy, who was on our dating episode, come to mind. And I think what I just really admire is just, well, I think one, I think as I'm kind of in a shift of a chapter where I am, back in Fort Worth, and my life does look different than when I was in living in Europe and such, which we'll get more on that later. But I think like as I'm here, and I just see you guys continuing to live y'all's dream in this international context, and how you strive with your careers, how you strive in seeking out relationships, how you strive in just and not just in romantic relationships, but in your friendships. I think that's just, I love it, and it's a life that I love to see, and I love it. It's really inspiring to me.
Aw, that's so nice. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah. So
So,
what? Yeah, go on.
no, 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 go ahead.
No, okay. So I was gonna say, so like, what about you?
Um,
pretty pretty standard.
so for me, honestly, like I feel like my 30s have really just been defined by the female friendships in my life, and I'm inspired by so many women that I get to be friends with for life, for short term, for long term. I would say something that has really inspired me since moving to Bali is I've met one woman in particular, but then through her, quite a few other women. And she's an influencer, and her whole social media platform is about being a child-free woman by choice. And she's just super cool because she takes herself out on dates. She travels all over the world. She's got like 3 home bases in 3 different countries, which is amazing. And she
Wow.
plans retreats actually for women who have specifically decided that they don't want to have children. And these retreats are so fun. The women are like going to restaurants and doing adventure travel and like reflecting and personal development and all this sort of stuff. And it's just, she has created a space for women who have chosen not to have children to connect with each other and share in that experience and have a great time. And I just think that that is such an inspiring thing because I think definitely now there's more attention on women who have chosen not to have children, but it's still kind of a rare thing. A lot of people have a lot of strong opinions on it. Like you should see the comments on her
Mhm.
social media. But I just think it's really, really inspiring that she has identified something about her that is different, and then she's made a whole career out of it. So I think that was really, really cool.
Oh, that
Um,
is, and I feel like it can, like, so many people can relate to that. So that's really
Totally.
cool.
So let's talk about the elephant in our lives, and that is social media and how social media and comparison culture, how has social media affected you in any way in terms of how you feel about yourself and the choices that you've made?
Hmm. I feel like, I've always known that there was pros and cons with social media, and I feel like for the majority of my, experience with it, it's overall have has been a positive thing. Like I feel like just what was filtered through my feed and then also what I was sharing, like it felt like more of like an inspiring thing. But
Mhm.
I would say that and I've always tried to not be like, I mean, comparison, what they say, like comparison is a thief of joy. So I've tried
Yeah.
to like keep that in mind. But I would say that more recently, I think, being in Fort Worth and stuff and, seeing everyone traveling. I mean, I still travel so much. So it's, I know it seems ridiculous, but it was a big shift for me to go
Yeah.
from living abroad to just travel extensively. And
Mhm.
maybe that seems a little, it's still such a privilege and I'm so thankful, but I think that shift kind of hit me a little hard. And so sometimes I get like a little sad when I see, people still living abroad. I mean, like, on one sense, it's so inspiring to me. In one sense, I'm like,
Yeah.
ah, I love that so much, like, and I miss it. And so I
Totally.
think sometimes it can get me definitely in my feels.
No, and I mean that makes total sense, and like we talked about this I think like on our mental health episode maybe, that like change is the number one thing that makes you feel uncomfortable and unsettled, and like you have gone through so much change in the past year, and so then looking and reflecting on that change every time you open up your phone has got to be really hard.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. And I feel like, another thing is, the kind of subtle or not so subtle pressures from, so we talked about social media, but I feel like another instance is through the subtle pressures from your friends and family. I feel like I've experienced that for sure, which I'll talk about, but what about you? Have you experienced that from your family or friends?
I am really really grateful, and I'll get into this a little bit later. I have so many inspiring women in my family who have also been quote unquote very different. And so
Hmm.
that has been actually very inspiring for me in like a role model sense for I feel much more secure in my choices because I have family members who have gone before me who have also embraced a different sort of lifestyle.
Yeah.
But I would say it's not the big moments where I have felt pressure. It's these like subtle, small moments that like friends and family, they just like drop these little breadcrumbs sometimes into conversations, which for them, they don't think twice about it. But for me, like it lands pretty heavily. And so, like, an example of that is like, if in my 30s I've gotten into a relationship and I'm excited about the relationship or something, and then I'll have friends who have small babies and they're like, you should have a baby, and then they move on to the next topic, and I'm like, whoa. And like of course like they're just excited because they have babies and they want their friend to have a baby, but like for someone who is like on the fence about that and that sort of thing, like when someone is casually just like you should have a baby, I'm like, Jesus Christ, like I don't know if I don't know if I want that. Also, should is a very strong word. And so
Yeah.
I would say it's just in those like in those small moments where people who have sort of have the things that are more traditional and they're like, you should do this, and I'm like, I don't know, for some reason it just puts a bit of a rock on my chest. And so I would say it's more the smaller moments for me. But tell me about you. That it sounds like it's going to be
Yeah.
juice sounds like it's going to be juicy.
No, no. I'm similar in with what you said. Just like, and I'm also like, I just pick up on a lot of things, and shifts in energy, little comments here, and I feel like I'm quite sensitive, and so little things really do impact me, and I think as well, and I think for me, kind of things like I feel like I've had some people in my life that have been like, oh, why are you so confrontational about some things? And I'm like, no, I'm not trying to be confrontational. Like, I don't want to, like, I just don't feel like my, my ways of thinking of how I want to live my life is being supported and celebrated and encouraged. And I feel like the only ways of life that are being supported, celebrated, and encouraged are the more conventional ways of life. And I want those to be and so I'm like, I want those to be celebrated, but I also want this to be celebrated, you know? And so like I feel like, and also like obviously we're similar in a lot of ways. I feel like I'm a blend of wanting conventional and unconventional life. Like
Mhm.
I love living abroad, would love to do it again, love traveling as much
Mhm.
as I can, but also like I love, like I'm engaged, which if y'all didn't know that, hello everyone,
She's
I'm engaged.
engaged.
And that's like something I've always dreamt of as well, as like, finding my person and being in love and getting married. Um, and, so, and I feel like, those things are naturally like, you buy a house, like, great job. Like, you buy a car, great job, which those are amazing. But like, it really hurt. I get my feelings hurt. I feel like I have to like defend other ways of living because it's just not naturally as celebrated. I mean, we've kind of talked about that on defining your own milestones episode. Um, but it's something that I feel like comes up in my life a lot.
No, I am so glad that you brought that up because I think anybody who does feel a little differently understands that feeling so well. It's like, you have people get celebrated the most for having a wedding. That's a huge big party. People get celebrated the most for
Mhm.
buying a house. It's a great big investment. People get celebrated for having a baby. Of course, like your body goes through a lot and there's a new human in the world. Like we should celebrate these
Yeah.
things. I'm not saying don't celebrate them. Of course celebrate them. They're massive. But if
Hmm.
you don't achieve those things, there's just so much if other things aren't celebrated, then you can sort of start to feel like I'm not worth celebrating, but then in your heart you know that you're accomplishing incredible things. And so we may not throw a party for the fact that we've started a life abroad, or we may not throw a party for the fact that we climbed the mountain or
Hmm.
built an international investment portfolio. Like there's no parties for that.
Yeah.
But at the same time they are like accomplishments, so I'm really glad that you brought that up. And then also I think, and again, people are not ill-intentioned at all, but I think when you do go to things like weddings and baby showers and all of these things, those are when those conversations happen the most. And so like
Hmm.
I've definitely shown up to weddings, or I've definitely shown up to baby showers where like everybody is obsessed with the little onesie that comes out of the bag. And there's something about me, like of course I'm there and I'm happy for people, but I definitely sometimes feel very out of place in those situations because like I don't know, I don't have that strong emotional response to a brand new baby blanket coming out of a package, and sometimes I feel bad about that, but also that's just the truth of the situation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And um, like it's just, what am I trying to say? I feel like obviously like, we connect as we love to travel, and like we've lived abroad in the same place and all over. And so we have some kind of topics of conversation that like we can connect over, and sometimes it's harder to connect with people who are in completely different like moments of life, but
Totally.
I also feel like, well, for me personally, and I think in general, because I feel that when you're living abroad or traveling a lot, your mind is always like, I feel like my mind is pretty open. Like I'm observing, I'm learning that like all this different ways of life going on around me. So then naturally I feel like I want to be open to these conventional ways as well,
Yeah.
but it's not always, you're not always met with that. And so then you kind of you see this contrast, and it's like hard to relate.
It's totally hard to relate. And I would say that like um I think if you let social media get you down, if you let these conversations, like if you think too much on it, like it can be quite distressing. And like I've sent you a million voice notes about this. I've sent my other girlfriends who live abroad a million voice notes being like, "Oh, someone else is engaged, someone else has a baby, am I behind?" And that can actually be a very negative headspace to get yourself in. And so for me, things that have really helped that are like sending a voice note, starting a podcast for for women who are doing things differently. But I think it is just also important to like have boundaries within yourself so that maybe you have a set amount of time on your phone that you stop scrolling, or maybe if you're starting
Mm-hmm.
to feel this way, taking yourself on an experience that reminds you that just because you're doing things differently doesn't mean you're doing things wrong. Like, I think it is really important to acknowledge that
Yeah.
being in a society that predominantly celebrates the normal conventional things, like you do have to do things for yourself to stay strong in your choices, I think.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think just mentioning boundaries as you did, like I think some people think that boundaries can be mean or not. I don't
Mhm.
know. I don't know what word I'm looking for, but like boundaries are just so important. And yeah, I think just really seeing like what you need for yourself. And I mean, something that came to mind is like maybe you don't want to be super like I don't want to like yeah like dramatic and I'm gonna unfollow these people. But I think sometimes a good boundary is maybe you should mute them because the content isn't really feeding your soul or giving you these positive thoughts. And so I think that that's another I've muted quite a lot of people because I'm just like
I
I'm not gonna see this.
I'm so glad you've said that, and I have muted and I've unfollowed people. Like, there've been content creators who, I have followed their journey and I've loved it, but then sometimes they've gone through changes in their lives that I haven't gone through, and then it all of a sudden becomes like a breastfeeding account, and I'm like, I can't do this. I can't watch this. I don't really care. And I don't really feel bad about that because those aren't friends, they're influencers.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think, like, yes, normalize unfollowing people if their social media content just doesn't bring you joy, and if especially if it brings you stress, like, you don't need that in your life. You can mute it. It's fine.
I think through our conversations, we've been talking about reframing different, you know, and being different can be a superpower, and it's okay not to be normal. And I think that with living a different life, like one, it brings resilience, it can bring creativity, and I also feel like living or evolving and living different ways of lives can also bring empathy because it helps you understand what that change can be and helps you understand what life can look like and also what it's looked like before. And I think it could really bring you this well-rounded view of life.
Totally. I completely agree. And I think that, like, I also think it's important as women to do things differently because we are setting an example for other women, for younger generations. Like, I mentioned this a little bit before, but I have and had a few different aunts who didn't have children. My mom had kids when she was like 36 or something like that. She got married much later in life, especially for 35 years ago. And so I feel very, very blessed that I had so many women in my life who were not having children, who were having crazy cool jobs, who were making art, who were doing things later in life, doing things on their own timeline, like forging ahead in their careers, like working their way up to the top of major corporations, this sort of thing. I feel really, really fortunate that I had so many women in my family who were doing different things because I feel like that really gave me the confidence to also make my own choices, which has been amazing. And so now I also feel like I have a bit of a responsibility because I've had that privilege to also be that for other people. So I work with teenagers and they are curious. They ask me all the time. They're like, "Why aren't you married?" And I'm like, "Well, I haven't found anybody I want to marry yet. So that's why." um,
Yeah.
and they're like, "Oh, you don't have kids?" And I'm like, "No, I've just been really enjoying my life and doing other things." And like, it's really important for me that, like, I think we share our stories on platforms like our social medias or our podcasts, or we
Mhm.
talk to other people in our lives, because I think the more people see that there's more than one right way of doing things, it just opens up more opportunity for other people. So I'm really grateful for that experience, and I hope to be able to pass it on.
Yeah, yeah, and it seems like you are. I think, like you said, like this platform is a great way to connect and share these stories. And also, I think your job and role as a teacher is so impactful. So I love that you're sharing, your life and your choices and lifestyle with them. It's really great, and it's also really special to have those super close relationships, like your family members who have been an inspiration. Um, it's fun to reflect on that, and I really love that.
Yeah. What are some things do you ever just celebrate yourself? If no one's having a party for you, do you ever just celebrate yourself?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think obviously it's like I want my most important people that I love
Yeah.
to like love my choices and celebrate them. So I do love that, but at the end of the day, I mean, I think it also comes from within, and you got to be excited and ah, I can't think of a way that I've like completely like just went and celebrated myself. I think on when I'm out on trips and stuff, I think that always allows me to just really reflect and feel like just thankful and proud of, the life created. I don't know.
Totally. I feel like it's very similar, like we were talking about in our last episode, like being up on a rooftop and reflecting. I feel like even, if I don't do anything to quote unquote like celebrate myself, every time I'm on a trip, I definitely have a moment where I'm like, good for you, Brianna. You have created a really cool life for yourself.
Yes,
And I
absolutely.
do I just really think it is important to big up yourself sometimes, because I think it's really easy, especially as a woman in your 30s, to go through your days feeling like you're not meeting the milestones. So, yeah, just big up yourself. You deserve it.
Yeah, you do. You do. But yeah, I think that like celebrating your life, celebrating your choices is important. And even when they're hard to explain, I feel like I've had to come to terms that not everyone is going to understand. And I think that's really important to come into terms with because I feel like I value the why and the understanding so much. Like I want to know always the depth of everything. And I always like think that people are the same, but they some people just don't care about that and are won't. And I think you have to be okay with that. And you don't have to explain your choices, you know?
I love that, and you have given me that advice in, like, some of the more difficult, especially even recently, like, moments as I've been trying to make some decisions, and, like, yes, I totally get, like, you want everybody to like you. You want everybody to think you're making the great choice, but sometimes you just gotta listen to that little voice in your heart and just go for it and do the different thing.
Yeah. The intuition is so powerful. It really is.
So I guess as we sort of like fade into the end of our episode, if you are listening to this, we would love to know what is something that makes you different, that you are learning to love, that you are learning to embrace. I think that if we were to give you any homework this week, it would be to just sort of think about, because everybody has something that makes them different. So what
Yeah.
are those things that make you different, and how can you have your own little personal moment of reflection or celebration this week? We think that that's a great practice to engage in.
Oh, absolutely. And then I feel like so far in this episode, I've been just reflecting on people in my life and also hearing the inspiring people in your life. And so I feel like be thinking of who are those people in your life and share with us because I feel like it's so special to have that kind of inspiration of people we look up to who have helped us be who we are.
Absolutely. And I think that I mean some parts of this episode were maybe like negative, not negative, but some parts of this episode were really focused on sort of the challenges that come with being different, but for me, it's just inspired me more to think about how my like different life has brought me a lot of joy, and I think probably you feel the same way. Anytime I've made a different choice, I've learned so much, I've grown so much, I've met so many incredible people. Um
Hmm.
and my life has just improved tenfold every time I've made a different or a normal choice. So I'm just really quite joyful about being different. And I hope that everyone else is too.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So, just a reminder, everyone, you are not alone. I think that sometimes you can feel like, especially if you are living, a different life than the people around you, you can feel alone, but there are people that you can connect with that have similar experiences and can understand that.
Totally. And that's why we started the podcast. And we hope you keep listening, and we hope you keep loving it, and we hope you keep joining us in these conversations. Morgan, if people want to connect with us a little bit more, where can they do that on the internet?
Yes, yes. You could connect with us on our social media. We're on TikTok and Instagram at The Global Girlfriend, or come visit our lovely website, theglobalgirlfriend.com. You can inquire there, send an email through there, or just email us directly at theglobalgirlfriend@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you and connect.
We would love that. Thank you so much for joining us. We love you. Embrace being different. It is truly a gift. And
Mm-hmm.
we're excited to see you next week. Have a great week, everybody.
Yep. Bye, everyone.
Bye.